Warning: this story may contain profanity and language that may be offensive to some. Also, don't forget to show the author some love in the comments. Okay, then we begin. My husband is changing. Written by Forged from Fear. For the past couple of months, my marriage has been going down a slippery slope. Not to the point of divorce, but I feel that one more argument like the ones we've been having recently could bring it into the conversation. My husband and I have been married for about 10 years now, and things started just as I had always imagined, straight out of a fairy tale. But these past 2 years have seemed more like a fairy tale in which the prince and princess were just, well, simply not in love. There were no more roses, no more date nights, no more sex, and just no more affection. Sure, on occasion, we would throw quips at each other, sparking the humour we used to love in each other, but it just wasn't the same. My husband was a chemical salesman and was always either at work or off on a business trip. Though we got in our fights and I could tell our love wasn't as strong, I still missed him. It was just us in that house, no pets, no kids. Just a couple on the brink of what seemed to be the end of our fairy tale. Once again, my husband was packing to leave for the next morning, and we had surprisingly not gotten in any fights today, despite the fact he had been home for only 3 hours. "Where are you going this time?" I asked, leaning on the doorframe of our bedroom. "Oklahoma," he responded, looking for his clothes in the closet. "Gotta get this deal done so we can get this trip started." I always wanted to go to the Grand Canyon, and walking around the house, a visitor could spot refrigerator magnets, brochures, and a few paintings of the vast canyon in its glory. Something about it always drew me in. Maybe it was how it seemed to go on forever. Or maybe it was just simply the multiple layers of colours it held going deeper into the canyon. Either way, he had surprised me about 2 days ago that he was planning on taking me there for our anniversary. Maybe in an attempt to light the fire that had seemed to go out so long ago. And I was all for it. Even though these times had been rough, I was on board for a reset to try and rewrite this fairy tale, the right way this time. The rest of the night went on as usual, with me doing the dishes and sitting in front of the television watching my reality TV. Tonight was good, and he joined me on the couch, and it seemed like things were on the right track. Even in bed, we were the closest to each other we had been in what felt like decades. As I drifted into the darkness, I even caught him smiling at me just as I closed my eyes. Maybe things were back to normal. Waking up, I looked around to see nothing but an empty bed with a note telling me goodbye with a heart around his name. Work had never been big for me, and in exchange for my husband working, I made sure to keep our house clean and looking just as it was when we first moved in. It was calm around the house, with the only noise being the humming of the fans from above. The chores around the house kept me busy throughout the day, with my lunch break being a PB&J and whatever chips I could find in the pantry. My husband had told me he was going to be gone for 2 days, which was usually how long he was gone depending on the distance. But this time I felt like I couldn't wait that long. As good as yesterday was, I felt like I needed him around. Like my old self felt when we first moved into this house. Today was Tuesday, which meant he would be back by Thursday, and not only was I ready to see him, but I was ready to begin the new chapter in our relationship. Minutes passed that felt like hours, those hours like days, and before I knew it, they turned into those days. It was Friday, and I had gotten no text back, no call, or any sign that he was even alive. Waking up Saturday, I hoped to see the image of my husband lying beside me with an explanation ready for where the hell he had been. But of course, there was nothing but his pillow and the covers. Just when all hope was lost, a knock echoed through the entire house, which jolted me out of my bed, dashing into the living room. With a smile that could have been used as a lighthouse, I swung the door open to see my husband now looking back at me. Before a word could be said, I swung my arms around him and welcomed him back while trying to practically squeeze the life out of him. I felt his arms slowly wrap around me, not matching the force I had given, but lightly, almost as those young couples you see hugging, as if they were committing a cardinal sin. Backing away, I looked up to see a lifeless and tired expression placed on his face, with messed up hair that looked like he had just got done skydiving. Pulling him inside, he seemed like he had just run a marathon, and though I was worried, the joy was overwhelming. He always came home tired, and I didn't blame him, so as always after greeting him, I started my chores and let him rest. As the day went on, I made sure to look around to hopefully catch sight of him, but there was never anything. I crept to our door to peek in, and just as I thought he was on his side facing away in the dark room. Watching for a moment, I noticed that he was breathing but very, very slowly. In my head, I counted how long his shoulder raised and lowered, and it was a solid minute in between. Maybe he was just sleeping weirdly. I watched some more and caught a glimpse of the reflection of the clock on my side of the bed of his face. His eyes were wide open, and he never blinked, and yet again he kept that same lifeless face from when he was at the door. Maybe he was sleeping with his eyes open, or maybe he was playing a trick on me. Whatever the reason, I decided it was best to go back to my chores. It was about 2 hours later when the shadows of the house began to expand, and the light from the sun began to creep behind the horizon, giving everything an orange glow, a soothing colour. Finishing up my vacuuming, I was on the last bit of the rug when I felt the hard tension of the cord from behind me. I turned around to see my husband standing there with the clothes I set on him just staring at me. "Good morning, sunshine," I said while giving him a quick peck on the lips. "Long trip?" "Yes," he replied in a monotone voice. "Very long." "I thought you said 2 days, Joseph. You had me worried sick. I thought you were never coming back." "Long trip." After the brief conversation, he turned around and made his way to the couch, and with a loud plop, he sat there in an upright position. Finally, getting the rug done, I began to wring up the cord and carry the vacuum back into the closet. But I couldn't help but feel the intense stare coming from the couch. I still had yet to understand why he was acting this way. But maybe he was just tired. Or maybe he was checking me out. Either way, I decided to ignore it and move on. About 30 minutes passed, and there was still silence except for the clutter I was making from preparing his favorite dish to welcome him back. Sometimes I swear I could hear a shuffle on the rug and would look back to see nothing but the black screen of the TV and the reflection of my husband, just looking. It seemed as if he was watching the reflection of me through the TV, and the sight of his hands placed gently on his knees began to freak me out a little. I needed to understand why he was acting this way. Handing him his food, I turned on the TV to break the silence and tried to ask him what he had done on his trip and if he had done the big deal. But I couldn't get anything out other than a stare and a few short sentences. I decided to turn on my show and saw in my peripheral as he picked up his food and chopped it down with a few bites. It only took about 4 bites for him to finish the whole thing. And as I picked up the dish, I noticed something red on the table. There was nothing red in the food I had prepared, and with confusion looked around his hand to see a chunk of his finger bitten off by his eating. The blood was pouring down his finger onto his hand, and little drops of blood began rippling in the pool it was creating. "Oh God, Joseph!" I screeched, running to the bathroom to get a Band-Aid. The chunk was pretty big, and though a Band-Aid wasn't going to entirely solve the problem, I felt that it would do the job from now to the hospital. "We need to take you to see someone right now." "No," he yelled, pulling his hand away. Just a long trip. What the hell had gotten into him? The last time I saw him, he seemed like he was back to the Prince Charming I had once fallen in love with, but now, it seemed as if he was converting back to the beast. The rest of the night was silent with only the TV making sound and me trying my best to stay away from him. I decided to take a shower and for some reason felt an unease as if I wasn't alone. Once again, I felt like I could hear him moving around, but each time I pulled the curtains there was nothing. I was no nurse, but what he had done to his finger was bad, and I was certain he would bleed out. But he was set that he wasn't seeing anyone but me. Finishing my shower, I was getting ready to pull the curtains when I caught a glimpse of something in the water. It looked as if a single drop of blood had gone into the other side of the shower and now was slowly coming to the drain. Was he in here with me? I swung open the curtains to what I thought was his hand quickly jolting from around the doorframe into the nothingness. Not daring to say a word, I went to the bed and decided it would be best to let him come in instead of calling for him. And by no surprise, I felt his side of the bed slump down and his head hit the pillow. Before closing my eyes, I looked into the reflection of my alarm to see him staring at me. His eyes pierced through the darkness, and his teeth seemed to have a red tint from the blood. Shutting my eyes as hard as I could, I focused purely on sleeping to get this nightmare over with. The next couple of days were all the same. He seemed to move like a statue and would only take his steps if I was looking. He never went to work, and I was too scared to ask why. Doing my chores felt as if I was being stalked to where if I made a sharp turn, I could catch a glimpse of part of his body in a doorframe across the room. It wasn't until a week when I began to catch the odor of something rotten. Something that smelled as if it had seeped through the cracks of hell into the house. It never went away, and in our bedroom was where I could tell the smell was the strongest. My husband hadn't taken a shower ever since he got back, and each time I wanted to confront him, I remembered that yell on the couch, so much authority that I felt like a prisoner in my own house. Other changes to him became more and more obvious as the hours passed by. His skin began to feel soft to the touch, but too soft, almost like the feeling of a warm, soggy tortilla. His thick brown hair began to thin, and I would always find clumps of hair in places where he must have been standing, always close to me. I never could explain what was going on, and was too scared to find out. I didn't dare walk outside, or I felt like yelling would be the least of my worries. The thing I noticed most, however, from him was that he always stared at me. I never saw his eyes budge and never saw a blink, but his whole head would turn with his gaze. I tried my best to keep my distance. The house was often silent, especially these past days, when suddenly I heard the phone ringing from within the kitchen. Almost like a child heard the ice cream truck, I ran to the noise and picked up the phone hoping it was anyone other than my husband, anyone who could maybe help me. In the distance of my house, I could hear the silent creak of a door opening, but no sounds of movement either way. I didn't care. Hello, can you hear me? It felt as if I had been stranded on an island and finally caught a glimpse of a plane. For a moment I felt the pressure of my husband, of the stench, of the little pieces of him all around the house go away. I felt free. Is this Mrs. Carter? A voice responded with the background of phones and people shuffling around the operator. Yes! Oh, thank God, it's so nice. I was cut off by the person. Ma'am, are you okay? Yes, I am now. I've been trapped in this house with my husband for so long. It's just so nice to hear another voice. Your husband? Yes, I'm not sure what has been wrong with him, but he's been acting strange. But now with you, I'm safe. Thank you. Thank you so much. trying to hold back my tears, ready to run out the door. "Ma'am, the reason I called was to inform you about your husband. I'm so sorry, but your husband was found 3 days ago on a ranch in Oklahoma. He seemed to have been attacked by some animal. Whoever is in that house with you is not your husband. Do you want me to send somebody to your location?" Fear. Straight and pure fear. I could feel the blood become cold in my body. My mind was blank, yet screamed so many things. I let go of the phone as it dangled from the cord and stared at the window to the yard. For the past week, I had slept with my husband, kissed my husband, and cared for him. And yet if that wasn't him, what had been there? What had taken his spot? I wasn't going to dare leave the kitchen when I could hear a silent splat coming from the living room. It wasn't loud, but every couple of seconds the sound of a drop of some liquid hitting a puddle of some sort. Some seconds post, the drops got more and more frequent, and that's when I heard a god-awful noise. It was quiet, but I could hear a sort of sobbing emanating from the room. This sob didn't sound normal, but as if multiple voices were conjoined to make this hellish sound. I could make out the sound of my husband among the others, but all were lightly conjoined into one harmonious, twisted sound. I reached for a knife and stayed close to the wall while creeping to an angle where I could see the reflection in the window. The laughing got a little louder with each inch I moved, and the drops continued to echo. When I was at the perfect angle, I focused on the window to see the image of my husband, standing there, smiling and staring. I could make out a liquid dripping from his mouth as he stood there just tracking me, almost like he could see me through the wall. Building up the courage to turn the corner, I twisted my body towards him with the knife pointing at him. The eyes. Oh God, the eyes. They stared at me, into my soul, and I noticed one was lower than the other. His skin looked mushy, and his hair was practically gone at this point, having been forced out with multiple pulls. I could tell by the scalps forming from where his hair had been. I looked at his mouth to see the most hideous smile. I could hear the subtle crack of his teeth as he grinned so hard his gums began to tear. Pushing his teeth onto one another made his gums bleed, and every so often one tooth would disappear into the back of his mouth. "What the hell are you?" I yelled at him. Looking happy to answer my question, everything stopped, and he just stood there looking at me. The blood stopped along with the laughing, and it was suddenly just me and my hell-bent husband. His mouth began to slowly open, and just when I thought it was done, he grabbed the upper and lower part of his mouth and began to pull. His eyes began to tear, and his flesh began to rip as he pulled more and more. I fell in horror trying to back up as what I thought was my husband was becoming more like something out of a nightmare. Fingers began to slide out from his mouth until I could make out 2 crooked hands overlapping his own. Then the ripping. Starting at his head like a zipper, the team of hands pulled him apart as something yearned to come out of the body that once laid with me. I could piece one by one a head, a torso, and finally, a full figure stepping in front of me. Satan himself, pure evil, looking at me with hatred. This force overwhelmed me, a strong and terrible force. Voices uttered in my mind terrible, horrifying things, wanting me to bow to their will. I couldn't. I was better than the demons haunting me. Or was I? My whole life had been meaningless. Everything was gone. My husband, my parents. What was there to live for? Humans are no better than the demons that walk below us. So why should I try and infect this world any longer? These thoughts rushed in, and before I knew I was drowning in an ocean of anguish, disgust, and pain. Maybe it was the figure in front of me making me feel all these terrible things. Of course it was. But maybe I had been suppressing these emotions for far too long. It wasn't making me think these things, but rather helping me let my true intentions come clean. Where I thought this thing was driving me into a place of madness, it was helping me see the light and what needed to be done. I missed my husband and parents, and everyone that I loved was gone, and I knew how to get to them. I raised the knife with a smile and tears in my eyes, looked at the beast in front of me in the eyes, which gave a crooked smile back, and pushed the knife hard into my skull. You've stayed till the end, brave soul. Bloody subscribe, and I'll see you in your nightmares. Good night.